Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. One thing that we're always told to keep in things like our bug out bag and our other survival kits is cordage. Paracord and rope can be used for many different survival tasks like building shelters and tying things together, but there's a lot of folks out there that don't know how to tie the knots that they would need in order to use that cordage effectively. So today we're going to be talking about kinds of knots that every prepper should know. And as we're going through these, be sure to keep that context in mind. So if you're someone who's learning knots for things like climbing or working with large heavy loads that could be dangerous if not secured properly, then please get some one-on-one instruction from a professional. Some of these knots are easy to get wrong, especially if you're new, and I don't want anybody getting hurt. And as we're going through these, keep in mind that you can do things like rewind the video and also use the controls down below to slow the video down. Just click on Settings, Playback Speed, and then you can pick one of the preset speed levels or click on Custom to adjust it yourself. And that'd be useful if you're trying to learn these knots, and maybe I'm going a little bit too fast because there's a lot of these that they're going to require several reps before you learn to do them properly. One of the most basic knots is the square knot, also known as the reef knot, and the best use for it is to tie a rope around an object like a sleeping bag or a sleeping mat. The easiest way to tie a square knot is to take the right end of your rope and place it over the top of the left and bring it back around. That should give you something that looks like bug antenna. Then place the left end over the right and bring it behind it under. Pull it tight and you'll have your square knot. It should look like the two ropes are looped around each other, and if it's done properly, it shouldn't slip when you pull on it. Square knots are also very easy to untie. Just grab each side of the knot and push them towards one another. Some people will also use this knot as a bend or a way to tie two different ropes together, but that can actually be pretty dangerous because the knot does have a tendency to slip, so you shouldn't do that for anything critical. The next essential knot that preppers should know is the bowline or bowline. The bowline is commonly used as a rescue knot to help lift people to safety, but it can also be used for other things like building shelters. To tie a bowline, start by making a loop in your rope, and when doing this, the working end of the rope should be on top of the standing end. Next, bring the working end of the rope underneath the loop, into the loop, and then over the top of it. Bring the working end behind and around the standing end at the top, and then back down inside of your loop. And then tighten it and you should have your bowline. If it's done correctly, the loop should stay fixed no matter which direction that you pull on it. The next knot that every prepper should know is the double sheet bend, and this is used to join two lengths of rope together even if they're different thicknesses. This one's easy to tie, untie, and it's also more secure than a regular just single sheet bend. To tie a double sheet bend, make a bite in one of your ropes and pass the other rope under and through it. Bring it over and around the bite and back underneath itself. Do this again, bringing the second rope over the top and around the bite and back underneath itself. Dress the knot and then pull it tight. When doing this with ropes of different diameters, always form the bite using the larger rope, and also be aware that this knot can come loose when not under load. The next essential knot we're going to talk about is the double fisherman's knot. This is a very secure way to join two ropes together or form a high-strength loop. This is a pretty easy knot to tie, but unfortunately it's one that you can overthink if you're not careful. To form a double fisherman's knot, take the right end of your rope and run it around the left end, forming a loop. Wrap it around again and run the working end of the rope through the two loops that you made and then tighten it up. Next, run some additional line through the knot that you just made to give yourself a little slack and then make another loop. Wrap it around again, holding the loops in place with your fingers, and then run the working end through them. Tighten that knot and then pull each end of the rope. The two knots that you made should slide together and then look like this. If done properly, this knot will not slip under most normal circumstances, but the main downside to it is that it's difficult to untie, especially if it's had a heavy load on it. Another use of the double fisherman's knot is to secure chin straps on hats like this Tilly. Since that knot can slide back and forth, it'll allow you to tighten and loosen chin straps as necessary. The next knot that every prepper should know is the Alpine butterfly loop. While the bowline is used to create a fixed loop at the end of a rope, the Alpine butterfly loop is used to create one in the middle of a line, and there's a couple of different ways to tie one. For the first method, make a fairly large loop, then create another loop by twisting that loop to look like a figure 8. After that, take the top loop of your figure eight and run it behind and underneath the bottom loop and the rest of the rope. When you do this, the rope should look very similar to a safety pin with a small loop on top and a larger loop on the bottom. Next, take your larger loop and run it through your smaller loop up top. Pull on that loop and then pull on the ends of the rope to set the knot. As you tighten it, the rope facing you should cross over itself, while it should look parallel with loops on either side when you flip it over. That method's pretty useful if you're trying to use an Alpine butterfly as part of something like a trucker's hitch, but it can be a little bit easy to mess up, especially if you're just starting to learn how to tie one. But the second method is a little bit more reliable, especially if you're new. For the second method, take your rope and run it around your hand twice. Next, grab the middle section of rope, that's the one I'm pointing at, and run it underneath the third loop, pulling it towards your fingertips. Then bring it back over and under all three sections of rope. Pull on the loop and both ends of the rope, and then pull the ends of the rope away from each other to finish setting the knot. That'll also form an Alpine butterfly loop. You should be able to pull on the loop from either direction without it slipping, and it should also be very easy to untie. Another advantage to this knot is that it can be used to isolate a damaged section of rope. So let's say I had a fray right here. Since it's in the middle of the loop, when I pull on that rope, it's not going to have any load on it at all. The next knot that every prepper should be able to tie is the Prusik or Prusik. The Prusik is a way to secure adjustable but non-slip loops on a larger rope. This is most commonly used in climbing, but you can use it to help make emergency shelters as well. Say you're using a tarp or a poncho that has grommets, you can use this to help make adjustable mounting points with toggles. To tie a Prusik knot, first you need to make a Prusik loop by taking a length of paracord and tying a double fisherman's knot into it. After that, place the loop under your other rope, and when you do this, make sure that your knot is a little off center from the bottom. Then take the end with the knot in it and run it through the loop on the other side. Pull on it a little bit and use your fingers to keep that loop open. Then run the end with the knot in it, back around the rope and through that loop again. And as you're doing this, make sure that the second loop is on the inside of the first loop. That's very important. Next, using your fingers to keep the loop open, run the end with the knot in it back under the rope and through that loop for a third time. This loop should be inside of the first two loops that you made earlier. After that, tighten up your Prusik knot. You can do that by pulling on each end of your loop and also by using your fingers to turn the loops so that they tighten around the other rope. And if you did it correctly, you should have a nice, neat stack of 6 loops. When you pull on the loop, it should bite into the larger rope, preventing it from slipping, and that should be true regardless of which direction you pull on it. However, you should still be able to slide the loop over the larger rope easily. Now, if you're going to be using this for climbing or other critical tasks, then I believe that the rope that you use for the loop should be between 50 and 80% the diameter of your larger rope. I don't believe this is, but once again, I'm not using it for critical tasks, so as long as you're just practicing or you're using it for something where like somebody's life or safety won't be endangered, then I think this should be okay. The next knot that every prepper should know is the trucker's hitch, and it has a ton of different uses. Historically, as its name suggests, it's been used to secure loads. We haven't always had ratchet straps, and this knot and ones like it are what people use to cinch things down. But one way that you can use the trucker's hitch for survival is to form a ridge line between two trees to help you set up something like a tarp shelter. And to start that, I'm going to use a bowline to help me tie some paracord around a tree. So start off by making a loop in your paracord and then run the working end of it around the tree. This would have probably been a lot easier with a smaller tree. Bring the end of the cord through the bottom of the loop and back over the top. Run it under and around the standing end of your line and back down into the loop. Carefully tighten it, and then you'll have your bowline. Next, run your rope to the next anchor, which in this case is just another tree. Now you're going to form a slip knot a few feet from your second anchor point. Form a loop and then make a bite a little further down from that. Run the bite through the loop and then tighten everything up. Next, bring the working end of your rope and run it through that slip knot. Now you could go ahead and cinch down everything from there, but I'm actually going to run the working end around it a second time. And that's going to allow everything to lock in place as you're tightening without losing tension when you let go. Then, to secure everything in place, form a bight and run it under and around your lines and then back underneath where it started. Tighten it up and you'll have a knot that'll hold everything together and can be released quickly. If you did all this properly, then you should have a taut ridge line that you can use for an emergency shelter. To take everything down, start by pulling on the end of that quick release knot. Then take that same section of rope and pull it towards your first anchor point, and everything should come apart pretty easily. There's a ton of variations on this particular knot. So if you've seen it done a little bit differently, say somebody used an Alpine butterfly loop instead of a slip knot, then that's the reason why. It's been around a while and there's just a ton of different ways to do it. And y'all, learning to tie these knots correctly requires a ton of practice. So go back, replay portions of the video, slow it down if necessary using the controls at the bottom of the video player. And if you'd like to see some affordable survival gear, then click here. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.